So, welcome everyone. If you're listening to the live stream, nice to have you here. If you're listening to the recording, equally nice to have you here. My name's Lorraine Murray, and I'm the founder of Connected Kids, an international programme for training adults to teach kids meditation. And this is my friend and colleague Hazel Melville, who is an expert in mindfulness, but particularly in relation to working with kids in the care system. And we have these mindful chats every month in order for us to share our wisdom, Hazel, or whatever we observe about helping kids, people like you who are working with kids professionally as foster carers, or maybe you've adopted and you're coming up across certain situations and you're struggling. And we know that well, if this existed elsewhere in this format, then probably we would just signpost people to it, but it doesn't seem to be there. So we thought we would just share with you what a different theme each month. And this one is about sibling rivalry and violence, and bringing a more, I suppose, mindful approach to this situation as well. If you do have questions or comments to make, you can put them on the group. It's kind of tricky for us to have this chat and also monitor them. We're not that sophisticated, but if you put a comment on and we don't get back to you, we will answer that later after the live stream. I hope that will help. But maybe you can just watch us and give us your thoughts as well if anything relates. So yeah, anything else to add, Hazel? Is that enough?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think we're just obviously both passionate about bringing mindful skills to children and young people, particularly ones that are struggling. That's a lot of them are.
Yeah, well, yes, totally. And I think that it's quite a, as we were talking earlier before we went live, that, it's really about helping people understand, I suppose, what meditation and mindfulness is and what it's not, that it's bringing that understanding to a life skill that I've certainly found very helpful as a foster mum. You probably found really helpful in your role working in
Absolutely.
the agency, and also we can see where the gaps are with people who don't have that kind of support through meditation or mindfulness, and what happens when that's not there. So if whatever we say, you can take just a tiny little glimmer or a practice or something that you might go away and try, then that's job done as far as I'm concerned, or might make you go and look it up a little bit more, read a bit more about it, learn how to do it. So sibling rivalry, do you want to, why did we choose this subject? Do you remember why?
Yeah, I think we discussed obviously a good few topics that come up, and there's loads, isn't there? There are lots and lots of different topics that keep coming up regularly for people.
There's a lot more, we've got coming up soon, yeah.
Common themes come up, but sibling rivalry, I've always found can be a really, really tricky one. It's and there is no magic wand, as we were talking about, Lorraine, as well. There is never a magic wand for this, because so many of the children and young people that I have kind of, supported, have been conditioned throughout very, very young ages to compete against each other. It's not in loving kindness relationships, that we all would want for them. We have, and I was telling you that about this, Lorraine, just before we came on as well. I've witnessed children who, as young as 6 and 4, brothers coming into care, who, when you found out their backgrounds, had actually been conditioned to fight physically with each other as entertainment for the adults in the house. Dad maybe had his friend round and the two boys were pitted against each other.
And can I just say, when I read that, oh my goodness, I don't know about anyone listening to this, but it made me feel quite sick at the thought of that happening to young. I didn't know their ages at the time, but kids that young. And I think that, I just want to, for anyone who might be feeling a little bit triggered by that or a little bit sick, I think it's really important to honour what you're feeling when you feel it, and not try and, because as a foster mum, I sometimes think, I don't want to know about that, but at the same time, if I'm going to support, kids as a foster mum, I have to be still open and holding that space for them. But sorry, go on.
No, and then we do, I mean, there's so many different kinds of, we're talking about sibling rivalry, and that's kind of what we see sometimes, is we see two siblings fighting physically with each other, but it can encompass such a big thing, can't it? Because we've got also siblings who, have resentment towards another sibling because they've made a disclosure, they've brought them into care. There's so many unresolved feelings all going on under the surface there, like the kind of anger mountain, what actually is sitting underneath that. But they have, as I say, a lot of the times been conditioned, and these situations have never been resolved. But it can also be, sometimes I've seen foster carers have a fostered or birth child, and another foster child comes into placement, and a lot of the times, everybody's great and it's well explained, but sometimes it's not always explained that well, and then you have a foster child who's already sort of competing, they feel, for adults' attention, and another child comes in with higher needs. There's just so many dynamics going on that we have to really consider, and I think we need to become detectives almost to try and find out what actually is going on underneath the fighting, the arguing, the name calling that we see. We need to be very mindful, very aware, and it's blooming hard work.
Yeah, I was going to say, so that paints a very clear picture. So we've got kind of a range of that sibling rivalry, from the real physical aspect, because those two kids you talked about, they're going to be in their kind of hyper vigilant kind of physical state of survival, because if that's what's happened to them over and over again repeatedly, when they come together, it is a sense of survival. So that's one aspect, like very deep aspect. But then you've got the more, I suppose, slightly more sophisticated emotional aspect, things like resentment and anger and having emotions and guilt and shame that would come up because, say for example, the child who is the natural member of the family and the foster child comes in, they might be really angry, but then they might feel really bad about themselves because that's how they feel, So we take each of those kind of situations slightly separately, I think. Overarching, though, for people who are listening, and we've said this before, is how it's really important that, we don't go in thinking, oh, meditation, mindfulness is going to fix this, it's going to fix that, it's going to fix this. And you talked about, having that awareness. So because it is exhausting. So in your mind, what does the mindful awareness do to support the foster carer or the adult in that situation?
I think it's being curious, having a curiosity to what's actually going on, and being curious with what's actually going on in yourself as well. Because, what I hear lots of times is people saying, well, I tried that and it didn't work, or I tried it and they did whatever and it didn't work. You try one thing or try a different tool, try something else. Well, we need to actually be constantly aware, which is the exhausting part, and kind of going, what has just gone on there? Am I fully aware? Am I fully present before the fighting, arguing, or whatever goes on? Or have I been lost in my phone and my TV program? Am I fully present with these children? And, the good thing, I suppose, about it is we know that the neuroscience now tells us that these kids' brains, all our brains are, they're hardwired, but they're not. They're soft-wired. We can change the connections, but it is constant repetition. So it's constantly trying to be on the ball, seeing what's going on, becoming an emotion detective almost, to find out what happened here to cause this before it actually escalates even more. And just, question yourself as well, because, if you keep using the same phrases like, right, you two just stop that, I'm sick of this, whatever, Has it worked? No.
Yeah.
So
I,
we
I
need
mean,
to change ourselves.
I think so one of the things I'm aware of is certainly in all my work with kids, including my own foster son and other kids I've worked with, is that there is this assumption by adults that children, young people will tell us when something is bothering them. And they don't have, if you take kids without all that traumatic background, even kids without all that don't have the language necessarily to explain what the issue is. So it's a huge ask because it's so much more complicated with the resentment and anger and other things we talked about to ask them to articulate what's wrong with them, what's going on. So like you say, it's almost like becoming an emotional detective. But before we can do that, we have to know when we're experiencing emotions as well, and being able to practice what it is that we're then going to teach these young people. So for example, I watch the kids I've looked after. Sometimes I've watched how just that in the moment it's very difficult for them to say what they feel. That's really difficult because it's heightened state, they're in a fight, flight or freeze, and I wouldn't leave it to that point to try this. But in the more quieter moments when you reflect back on what happened, and you do have to make space for them to talk about how they feel and what they felt. And if they can't put that into words, you have to go through those words with them and even explain what some of those words are, So there isn't just anger, there's resentment, there's annoyance, there's irritation. These are all different. And a lovely mindful activity might be to do a little mind map where you draw the emotion that you think it might be, what they might think it is, and then teach them, drawing off lines from that, lots of different emotions that might connect to that. And that's a wake-up call for many kids, because they don't know that that's sophisticated. They just go from 0 to 100 and suddenly they're going, oh my goodness, And then you've also got, the fact that you've got, you're giving them, I often think people heal when they feel listened to. Absolutely. And heard. So the fact that you're taking that bit of time might seem like an awful big exercise. It could save you hours of fighting and screaming and everything else in the long term by spending that time teaching them a little bit about it so they can acknowledge and be heard and say and letting them know that what they feel is really normal.
Because that's it. So many of them feel guilt and shame for having these feelings. And then actually, or having not maybe grown up knowing that these feelings and this behaviour is not right, to then it be pointed out by somebody else, can then make them turn inwards and go into themselves more because they think, well, I already feel bad about myself, and it makes you feeling worse. And our kids struggle with compassion. We need to teach them kindness and compassion, and anything that we can do to help with that, mindful exercises that teach mindfulness, kindness, compassion for themselves will help them to be kinder, more compassionate human beings and towards their siblings as well.
Yeah, but it's like I don't want anyone listening to think that, oh yeah, that's what I want. That's we progress and we have to demonstrate that too. So so even when they've pressed your buttons, they've triggered you, you've maybe blown up at them, you've had a difficult time, you've had to remove yourself because you think, oh my goodness, you're driving me crazy. It's about the ability also, that little mindful map thing I talked about isn't just for them, it's for you. And it's for you to sit down and go, see when that happened? This is what I felt, and this is what I felt, and this is what I felt. And so you equally have to honour what you feel, but ensuring though that we're not blaming them for those feelings. We're saying, these are my feelings. This is what happens when a situation happens I don't like. You're still great, and I still love you, you're amazing, but the behaviour, that's what makes me feel like that. And I have to honour this, you have to honour this, and together we have to work on helping you change that behaviour. And I think that to me is worth, its weight in gold.
And knowing, I think as well, Lorraine, that, every interaction will not end well. We're trying to recondition, behaviours that have been taught for sometimes a very, very long time. Those boys that we're talking about were young, but you have children older than that have been conditioned a lot longer than that, who've seen that as the norm in their life. So we have to kind of sit down and be gentle to ourselves as well and say that this is difficult, but I know that I can make a difference here with just the connection part and just, okay, that didn't work maybe this time. And what's my fear here when it doesn't work? Do I feel judged by that? Ask yourself, because sometimes I know I've seen myself in situations and stuff as well, and I feel I have to fix it. I have to be the one who fixes it, but sometimes actually kids just need to fix things out themselves. But the more we can kind of be aware of how we're feeling and stuff about it too helps.
This is a funny thing you saying that about needing to fix. So, if I'm talking about helping kids, discuss their emotions. If they can be put, if you don't have a list of emotions, search on the internet, you'll find a whole wide range of emotions that you can discuss together, what they mean and your understanding of them and how it works. And the same with yourself as well. But I think it's that sometimes I think as foster carers, as parents, adopters, there's almost this sense of you feel too vulnerable going into how you feel, or I think there's almost like there's resistance by adults to acknowledging what they feel, or that they didn't get things right, that they made mistakes. I mean, the conversation, this is something that, when Hazel and I talk about mindful conversations, mindful chats, it's a combination of listening, yes, really listening to that young person, honouring what they feel, but it's also about, I call it speaking really truthfully, mindfully, and that is about being really honest. Yesterday I had a chat with my foster son, and we were talking about the struggle with change, and I was explaining and saying to him, but we made mistakes. My husband and I, we made mistakes, but we don't just continue making those mistakes. We have to look at that and explain to you and work out a way to remedy that. But see, even that admission of making a mistake is something that adults, they don't want to do that because it feels like they've let their guard down, and you're like, how are kids going to learn it's okay to make mistakes if we won't own our mistakes?
Because we're frightened of being seen weak, aren't we, in front of children who have come from, backgrounds where there's all this power and control. And, so we need to think that we are the ones who are in control here, and you will do as you're told, kind of thing, the old-fashioned sort of way. I'm in control, but we're trying to do that from a nice place sometimes. We're trying to say we're in control to keep you safe, but what we need to do is get down to the child's level and actually say we're with you. We're not, yes, we're trying to keep you safe, but we're with you and we're listening to you. And each time connect in that way, that it's not a judgment on you, how you've behaved. It's it's a reteaching, a reframing, isn't it?
Yes, reframing it. Yes, definitely. And that can be, that can be really, that can be a really significant moment, I think, for you as the person who's looking after or connected to these children, and for the children themselves to realize that, because, I think there is this tendency, that this ideal that we all have about kids who've ended up in care, that we want to make things better for them. We want to change everything for them. What we've done is change the environment around them, and hopefully that has provided many things that were missing before. But the internal environment is what you're working with on these young people, and you can only help them navigate that internal environment if you know how to navigate your own internal environment. And if you don't know how to do that, then this is when it's really going to become quite unstuck, and I think that that's why we're both, we don't want you to think we're just saying, yeah, go and learn meditation and practice it for the next 10 years. I don't mean that. I mean, just like start owning your stuff, start breathing, start, noticing when you're not breathing, filling your cup, when
Yeah,
you know it's getting quite empty. You wouldn't run your car on empty. So why would you run yourself on empty? So what little things are you putting in place to fill up your cup? Because it is that kind of roller coaster experience
absolutely. Yeah.
sometimes.
We want, we want everybody, as we say, that practice, just like me, everybody wants, as I think I said that the last time, we all want to feel happy, we all want to feel connected, we all have the same emotions. And I was
Yeah,
talking to that with a teenager just recently, and saying that, and I think I maybe said this last time, but how he was sort of like, oh my goodness, yeah, everybody out in the street wants to feel the same way. We all want to feel
yeah,
happy. We
yeah.
don't want to be fighting. We don't want to be having to deal with these things. So it's just to say, building that capacity to realize, how am I feeling at this moment
Mm.
in time,
You
Most
shared
definitely.
something on your Facebook page. I've actually sent it to my foster son. I don't know if I can pull it up. It was
Mm,
an image. I shared it to our mindful caring group as well, actually.
yeah, I noticed
There's
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was all about different emotions and what it could really mean. So I'll just take the first one. Anger could be that you're feeling powerlessness. And when I read that sentence, I thought, oh my goodness, that's so him and what's been going on recently. And so, one of the other things you can do, like I call it your intuition is like your GPS system. It's like that internal environment. You can really kind
Yeah.
of have a feeling sometimes, oh, I'm going to do this. And then sometimes our logical head will come and say, oh, don't do that. But the feeling of
Yeah.
it, the heart-centered feeling of it. And I did this today because I don't normally do this. I thought I'm going to share this with him. I'm going to
Yeah.
send him this privately on WhatsApp to him. Just let him know I'm thinking of him and that how important he is to us. And I'm not having any expectations that this will be a huge light bulb moment, but it felt like the right thing to do. And I also
Yeah.
wanted him to know I was thinking about him and I care about him, and
Yeah.
that reading this made me think of him.
Yeah.
And, it was all about different emotions and what they could really mean. So look it up on our Facebook group if you want to see that. But I just think sometimes that is also a very mindful act,
Absolutely.
of showing care. It doesn't need to always be care in the sense of obviously we provide food and shelter and all those things. It's the whole changing that for them to change the internal environment is saying, even when you're not with me, I do think about you.
Yeah.
And here's a little thought. I'm just going to WhatsApp you with a funny GIF or a meme or something that is letting you know I'm thinking of you. And I think
Yeah.
some, kids can often feel, very lonely with the circumstances because, my foster son, he has friends who are not in care at school, but I think that he does have a sense that that makes him a little bit different,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how he consolidates that can be quite challenging.
It makes so many of our kids feel slightly different, like where do they belong? That's a massive thing for them, is where
Yes.
do they belong,
Yeah.
because yeah, they really don't know. And I do think the whole care system throughout, we're getting better, but yeah, we provide food, shelter, whatever for them, but the whole emotional aspect, we need to be teaching people much more about how we feel inside. And that's the whole mindful part of it, isn't it, Lorraine? That I say, that connection to other people, how we feel, and being able to articulate that, and, or just realizing that everybody feels that way at times.
Yes.
There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with it. There's
Yeah.
no guilt, there's no shame in feeling anger. It's just how we deal with it at the time, and explaining why we feel angry. And if we can get that from kids from the very, very start, hooray. If we can get it to parents as
Mm.
well, early intervention, teaching parents this is how we need to be. We need to teach everybody about emotional literacy, really.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, so kind of going back to what we started with, which was about the sibling rivalry.
Mm.
You know, you've got like these really kind of feral situations that you were describing earlier for some kids. So for me, anyone who's listening in terms of mindful support for them, I wouldn't try and teach those kids meditation mindful skills together. I think my advice would be to do it on separate occasions, to dedicate a little bit of time to both of them so that you can develop something that's right for them as a young person. And understanding that they're in their fight or flight means that we have to work on the real basics of probably breath and body, and helping them to recognize the signal of that trigger, and then using their breath and their body to self-regulate. And that takes practice and time. So before we even get into the emotional parts, if you're in that situation where you've taken on kids who've really been pitted against each other, that's where I would suggest starting. But then the awareness of those emotions will come in, as we were talking about with other scenarios, and some mindful activities that help us to explore that. I would never push the emotional exercise on children, or mindful practice. I think we've got to practice it first and honour it before we then introduce it to young people. But when we do, we've also got to respect that it could be incredibly painful for them to acknowledge what they're feeling. There can be, I think there's kids in care carry a huge amount of energy of grief about their circumstances and who they are. And I know from my experience, my foster son doesn't want to go there. It doesn't.
We're picking at a sore. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a long period of time. I mean, going through emotions with him, he's nearly with us for 3 years now. So we're at that stage where, and he's a little bit older, I can start to have that kind of mindful conversation with him. But a large proportion of, him being here with us was me working on all the things that were coming up for me so I could fill my cup and support him, And I think I just really want to bring that home to people.
I think it is. It's a starting point, isn't it? Though, that doing mindful activities together, like I say, going out for a nice walk, stopping, listening to what can you hear, can you hear the birds? What can you see? Or I'll maybe suggest a colour. Let's see how many times we can see a certain colour, and how does that make us feel? And just kind of starting on the most basic things, especially for kids if they're just struggling. You can start to see that happening.
Yeah.
Get out for a breath of fresh air and a walk, etc.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or I have suggested, as say in the past, music again. Teens are so taken by music and stuff, but even for younger kids, if the environment, as I say, the kids are just always going for each other, and throughout lockdown, that was a really difficult stage for people, obviously, as well. So, I would suggest kind of calm, soothing music. In the background, or happy music, playing while the kids are playing together, maybe quite nicely, and just have that going, because you're getting that whole emotional, how we feel when we connect to music. It brings a whole emotion with it as well, doesn't it? So the more we can create those positive connections with the kids together, the better.
Yeah, I think, I agree with you, any kind of movement, I mean, definitely going outside in fresh air. And if you're lucky enough to live somewhere where there's a little bit of nature, we've not got time to go into it today, but that has huge therapeutic effects on your whole nervous system. And there's a lot of evidence building up about that now. So even though if you think on the surface, it will make no difference, it will make a huge difference, whether you're mindful with that or not. If you can add mindfulness to it, it turbocharges the therapeutic effects of being out in nature. And that's for you and for the kids as well. But then, as you're saying, sound and music, and I also think it's a good idea to maybe switch off things like, we don't have our TV on very often. We maybe have the radio on, but even then I'm very aware of when the news comes on and this story and that story. And, you know, we think our kids aren't listening or taking that in. Oh my goodness, are they taking that in? It's really, really being absorbed and having to be processed. And again, it's back to that. They don't know how to communicate how much that bothers them. But there's something, and they don't even notice how much it bothers them until it comes out in their behaviour. So I'm not saying having a silent house, but like Hazel says, you know, think about what's playing in the background for them, and can you bring something in that just feels lighter, feels more, you know, kind of heartwarming, or even funny as well.
Exactly.
You know,
Laughter connects
funny.
us,
Laughter's
doesn't
a
it?
huge thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always say capture those moments as well if you can, when people are, you know, family experiences together or good connections with, you know, 2, 3 siblings, however many it is, capture those so that you can go back and it really connects with a heart that, you know, you have had good times together, you know, all these kind of things, most definitely. And I think that's it, it's making a plan, because again, if you're that emotional detective, you can start to see when there are triggers going on. You know, is it before dinner time that they'll start to argue? Is it, you know, when is it? Is it before bed? You know, what are they, what is it they're seeking, you know, as
Could be
well?
food. You know, it's like I've noticed the temperament of my foster son improves dramatically if I make sure he's got something to eat when he comes home from school. And I know it sounds really obvious, but it was like I thought he would just ask or take something. And I had to say to him, when you come home from school, you must be hungry. So please go and get yourself something to eat, or let me know and I'll get you something, because dinner won't be till 6 o'clock, whatever. And, you know, that in itself, you know, we've heard of the word hangry, that in itself can be really nurturing for them, because they feel looked after, you know, and it's something they don't know how to ask for as well. And you could even, you know, at some point, if it's worth doing once they're over the hungry stage, but you can actually turn eating into a meditation practice where you start to explore different sensations of taste and smell and touch, and where it comes from, being curious about that, you know. So it's not just about shoving it all down, you know, your throat.
Which a lot, again, if our children do, because they don't know where their sometimes their next meal's been coming from. So a lot of them struggle with that. So it's a really good one, I think. Really good one. Or as somebody said to me before, always add water. Do you know, if a child is struggling or something as well, sometimes do they need a drink? Or do they need to go and play in water, or do they need to have a bath or a shower or something? You know,
that's
that's very
true.
calming as well. So add water if all else fails. A snack and a drink.
I know. And I think in terms of, you know, it's not about trying to do all this together and help them to get on. I think it's actually to help with sibling rivalry. It's allowing them both to feel, to try and do these nurturing things with them so that they feel good within themselves. And if they feel good within themselves, then they don't, it's not about the need to push and pull with the sibling, because you know yourself, when you feel good within yourself, you don't have that desire to like hurt anyone else. You know, you just don't. You don't need to take from someone else. You don't need to punish someone else, because you actually feel quite good within yourself. So if you can put these little things in place. So anything else to add, Hazel, before we finish?
I think it's just about, you know, just a reminder of just trying to connect, listening to each person within the environment, basically making sure they're heard, and being that detective and finding out what it is that brings them joy, what they enjoy, because it might not be the same as their sibling, etc. as well. So trying to make sure that they each have moments of joy, and you're not just trying to do something that, you know, maybe fits one better than the other.
And kind of just really practice your kind of mindful listening to yourself, but also to the young people in your care, and and don't feel like you have to always get it right, you know,
Yeah.
that, you know, and be able to own that as well. That's really important. But
Mindful listening all the way to yourself and to the kids.
I know, totally. I'm just gonna now we've got another one coming up, last one in June, haven't we? We've got a wee podcast.
Yeah.
Do you remember what it's about, Hazel?
I think it's about Groundhog Day, how we can get out of Groundhog Day, because it can feel really tough at times, doesn't it? I mean, like we're saying, we can just keep saying the same messages sometimes and feels it's not going anywhere.
Yes, so it's that sense of is there, you know, yeah, any kind of I'm bringing in mindful skills to help you cope when it feels like a bit of a slog.
Yes.
You know, and it can feel like that. I mean, I've said to Hazel, it's really curious for me how it just feels really, it feels like you're making progress, and then suddenly this roller coaster, it goes, "Whew," you know, you're like back down there again. You're like, what? Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, I can't, you know. And then, so I suppose the next session about Groundhog Day is for us to build, using meditation to build resilience
Yeah.
when we're experiencing that, and for the young people as well that we're looking after.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anybody who is in the situation with sibling rivalry, you know, it's just so difficult. You really need to, like you say, top up your own, you know, self-compassion, be kind to yourself, because it's not easy.
I know, certainly the world is pitted against us at the moment, so we need to all the tools we can get. But well, thank you for listening, everyone. And if you do have questions, please let us know on the Facebook group, or if you're on the YouTube channel, and we'll put up our details if you want to get in touch with us to discuss it more one-to-one, or anything else, that services that we offer. And yes, I think that, you know, our advice is always just take one small step at a time, you know, just practice with yourself first, see how you get on, and then you can start to help incorporate that into the lives of these young people. But it does work, it really does work, you know.
Yeah.
So we're not doing this because we have some theoretical view of it. I have practiced it, used these skills. Hazel's used it with kids as well, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing to watch, you know, there is progress, you know, there, it really is like watching a miracle unfold when you start to see the difference in these kids, you know. And don't think it's going to, although my son's been with us for 3 years, we saw within 6 months quite a shift in him. So, you know, you can persevere with this, and you will see results pretty quickly if you decide to start practicing being mindfully aware, spiritual detective, emotional detective, like you said, Hazel. So
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, keep at it.
great. Okay, so I'm going to stop the live stream, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye.